And I find it really, I find it quite sad that queer identity has become so boring and yet so bloody factional as well. We're supposed to be at the top end of the cultural pyramid telling everybody else how to do their shit. And it feels like now we've kind of lost our shit a bit. But anyway, that's a whole different story.
I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Timberlina is the world's #1 ecologically minded bearded drag lady, and also a previous guest of the podcast. We had such a fun, rambling, meandering conversation the last time that we decided to get together and do it all again. And this time, we talked about Timberlina's time nannying for a young family in Westchester County, north of New York City. On weekends, she would mostly flee to the bright lights of the Big Apple, exploring the queer scene in Manhattan. But occasionally, she would venture to an out-of-the-way bar called Triangles, which was in Connecticut. We caught up to talk about being queer in the 90s, chasing excitement and community, and we also read over the online reviews for the bar, which I found kind of fun.
There was a poster in the sixth form common room. I had quite an odd time during my teen years, and it subsequently ended up, long story short, going from quite a formal grammar school to a very happy-go-lucky comprehensive. And then in that last year of which would have been the A levels, last year of high school, I had so much more fun than I'd had previously, but I subsequently flunked my A-levels. Well, I got very low marks. Anyway, I knew for whatever reason that I was going to go to the States. I just wasn't quite sure how this was all going to materialize. And there was a poster outside the common room, and it was for Au Pair in America. And so I just thought, oh, okay. And it was like, be paid to live there, have a visa, live with a family, get your fingers in the dirt of the culture that you're living in. And I thought, well, this sounds great. And so obviously there was no internet, and half the time it takes me I have to take a moment and really think about how I must have orchestrated these things, because there was no internet. So I couldn't get my smartphone out and relay the poster to my phone. I would have had to written down probably a phone number or an address. I would then have to have written the letter or called the number to have got the application form.
Oh, it's exhausting.
I know. This is like May. So this would have been May or June. So I'm just about to do my A-levels. I'm also teaching French kids here. And then I'm also, by snail mail, orchestrating an application with Au Pair in America, which meant that I had to go for an interview at some funny hotel somewhere in North London. And I have absolutely no recollection of how that all worked out, other than maybe I borrowed my mum's car to get there. Anyway.
But it all came together.
Anyway, it all came together. I would have used an ATZ to get there. Anyway, sorry. I digress already. I'm not even there yet. Anyway, it all came together, and the one, and I mean, obviously they were very. They stressed the fact that there weren't many boy nannies, but that they were quite in demand. So that this would probably be a really good opening, and they seemed very positive about my whole application. And the one and only family that called me up was the Stern Moors of Mount Kisco, New York, and I think they sent. So basically, my, for want of a better term, portfolio would have gone to them, goes to all these families.
With your glamour shots.
with my glamour, exactly, with all my headshots and all of my, my video reel, my show reel. And these families go through all the stuff, and then they call up their people at the au pair agency, and then they say, yes, we'll have Tim. And so that was it. So they sent, and so subsequently then they contact me, and I say, yeah, of course I'm interested. Are you crazy? So then they say, great, well, we're going to send you their portfolio, their brochure. And so I get this lovely letter from them, all the family, all the pics of all the family. At the time they had 2 boys. One was about to be born. That's why they wanted to they were really into getting a male au pair, because they had 2 boys. They were going to have a third boy. They had lived in the city for many, many years. Steph was originally from New York anyway, from New Rochelle in Westchester, right down near Manhattan. John was from Ohio, but they, as I say, lived in Manhattan, met in Manhattan, were a total, lived down in Tribeca. It ticked every box I could possibly have wanted. And we're now living in Westchester, which is just north of the city. And, well, of course, I wasn't going to say no anyway. So I just said, yeah, great. So it all worked out. We had would have had a telephone interview, me and the parents. And we got on really well. And then that was it. Signed, sealed, delivered. They then sort of give the green light. I get a visa. And I hop on a plane. And then I get on a plane with, I don't know, 60, 100 other au pairs on there.
And you just going to live in a house with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah, but what was good about it was, in fact, ironically, it was the last year that they let men or young men and boys, as it were, to become au pairs. After that, it wouldn't stand up in the Single Equality Bill, but at the time, that's what they were doing. I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe they just weren't enough applicants, but anyway. But yeah, it was totally legit. So au pair in America, you would fly over to New York, and that's where everybody would congregate. All these au pairs would converge from all over the world, and there were people from all over Europe who were going to America to be au pairs. And then you land in New York, you'd have 3 days orientation in New York, and then everybody would go their separate ways. And everybody was going all other places. I was quite lucky to be that close to me. I mean, and I'd always wanted to go to New York. Don't get me wrong. New York was kind of it. So the fact that, I was living, and also, but added bonus to that also was being in Westchester meant that there was a double whammy as it emerged, was because it's, it was like a 50-minute train ride from the city, and yet you are in the most spectacular landscape. It was like Mary Poppins, and not Mary Poppins, Snow White. It was basically like a Disney film. Any of the Disney films. It was basically like that.
So woodland creatures coming out to sing with you.
Yes, woodland creatures coming out to sing. All of a sudden, various pieces of crockery would burst into song. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. So I'm assuming it went well in terms of
It was fantastic.
Okay.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. Yeah. I was green as cabbage looking the first year I was there. I was 18. I was very aware of being underage, so to speak. You have to be 21 to imbibe there. It was an interesting time as well, because, so where were we? This is 91. And so trance and warehouse parties were coming into their own. I'm going to go off on one now, actually, but please feel free to bring me back to kilter. But I'm just sort of giving you an idea. So, it's like the first, so for example, I was from a seaside town called Frinton-on-Sea, which is where I grew up, Clacton, Essex, basically, the posh bit. And, when I went to London for the first time to go clubbing, I took a suit, because I thought when you go clubbing, you wear a suit.
Oh.
So there we are. We turn up at the Brain Club on Wardour Street, which I think then became the Trash Palace later. But yeah, the Brain Club was unbelievable. Yeah, we turn up in a suit, and I just remember the bouncer on the door. It was like, loosen up, mate, and undid my tie a bit, and I was obviously terrified. But then we went into this club in London. We were the only people wearing formal wears. I was with my friend Liz, and she was dolled up, and I was in a suit, and everybody else was wearing baggy t-shirts and probably on ecstasy. So. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't really adept at going out anyway. So to know that I was now in this city where the legal age was 21, I was all very like, well, in which case I mustn't go anywhere. I mustn't go to a pub because I'm underage. I didn't think, oh, sod that for Game of Soldiers. I'm just going to try my low play. I kind of abided by it, but um, I did meet some incredible people, and I did end up kind of going out at various places in town and in the city, and it was amazing.
So then what was the deal in terms of nannying? Was it like a 5 days a week and then you've got the weekends off or?
Yeah, basically that was it. I had
Ah.
five. Um, I had Thursday afternoons off. Friday nights I would have to work because that was the date night. So the parents would go out for dinner, which I always thought was a really good idea. They would go out for dinner every Friday night and they would just check in, reconnect with each other, have a child-free moment. I would stay at home with the kids and we would watch a Walt Disney film.
So on the weekends you were free.
And then, exactly. So then I would either stay in Kisco or more often than not, I would hop on the Cosmic Wagon train first thing on a Saturday morning or even on a Friday night and head into the city. And especially the second time I was there, 95, 96, I would often go in on a Friday and not come back until Sunday. And they were very cool with that. And that was fine.
Ah, so the timeline here is that you were there for a
Yes.
year from 91 and then you went back later on in 95.
Is correct. So I was there from 91 to 92. I like to call that my orientation period. Uh,
Just like figuring it out. But then, so 95, 96, you were back with
yeah,
this same family.
I was back with the same family. Yeah.
Oh, how weird.
But if you think about it, that's only 3 years because I got back in 92 in sort of August, September 92. And then it was the summer of 95 that I went back. So actually, that's only 3 years, which isn't that long.
No. And then, so how did that work out? Did they just get in touch with you directly and like, hey,
Oh my
come
God,
back?
yeah, totally. And again, there was no internet, and it was really weird. I was literally sleeping behind on the floor behind a couch. You couldn't make it up in a friend's flat slash house in Stoke Newington, and I I'd had a cycling accident. I'd broken my leg, severed a cruciate ligament. For those who are interested in broken legs, and sort of rendered myself completely, like written that the second quarter of the year off. And then I was kind of feeling a little bit disillusioned with my university course. And so I'm living in this house on someone's floor in Stoke Newington, and the phone rings, and it's for me. And it was like, well, what's happened? It's got to be my mum because she was the only person who had the number where I was. And they were like, no, it's somebody called Steph. And I was like, oh my God. So I get on the phone and it's Steph. It's Steph, the mother of the family. And we stayed in touch. Don't get me wrong. We were like, they're literally like a family to me. And to this day, we're in touch regularly. And it was Steph on the phone. There I am, completely mesmerized. It's like, wow, yeah, whoa, what's going on? How come you clearly got the number from my mum, and what's going on? It's great that you've called me. It's so great to hear from you. How are you doing? So then she started sort of saying, well, they've had this wild child au pair. It's kind of really made them feel like they've sort of slightly gone off the rails a bit, and they really kind of want to bring it back, and they really missed me being there. And I was saying, oh my God, I really miss being there. I'm just having this really weird year, and I broke my leg, and I'm really disenchanted with college. And then it's like both of us, the penny dropped. It was like, what I really could use is a year away. And she was like, what we could really use is you come back, and it was like, oh, okay. So should I come back then? Would that work? And she was like, well, yeah, are you serious? I said, well, yes, but we got to get a visa. I don't want to be illegal because I didn't want to jeopardize my chances of ever going back again. And also, as I said, I was green and cabbage looking. So I was just like, got to be legit. Terrified of authority. Anyway, so she was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. So that was it. So that was in the July and the August, and then I think it was the end of the August. I literally put the phone down. I was like, okay, guys, I'll see you later. I'm going to the States, and I think it took like maybe a couple of weeks to sort out the visa, maybe a month. And then I just got on a plane and went back to New York.
Oh
And it
wow.
was a whole, it was talk about step up. It was like a whole different experience. Going back was brilliant. It was amazing.
So what would you say are the main differences then between the first time you were there and the second time?
I think landing there and being totally familiar with all of the geography and where everything is, and sort of having this familiarity with it as well, because what am I? I'm 24. So still there, like a year somewhere, but then also subsequently every summer I would go there for a month or 2 months, you know. So, this is a place where I've spent quite a lot of my time already. It was really felt like being able to pop home, and see see that family, I suppose. Um, and that was amazing. But then also having a new sense of confidence, because now I was not 18 anymore. Now I was, in my early mid 20s. So I was perfectly happy and very at ease with then going out. So that was a whole new world, which I was then going to step into.
Mm.
Um, and that was really exciting. That was really exciting. It was. I think it was probably the first time I felt really sort of confident in what I was doing. You know.
And when you say doing, do you mean everything
Yeah,
or?
I mean everything. I think in terms of the job, because I knew the kids and we'd been in touch, so there was no, even though they're very young, and that's can be a very difficult issue. Because if kids don't necessarily have a sort of facial memory until they're like one, or certainly before they're one. And so I had carried on the relationship with the kids, so they were aware with who I was, and so that kind of beefed up that role. I mean, one of them was problematic, and that was the whole. I mean, I hadn't bargained for that, but that was really interesting. Just working on that. One of them was this was the early days when kids started being diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, and how that all worked, and that was really really fascinating. I think the culture had slightly changed, so now everything we were just beginning to have email. So that made me feel somehow like I was, I really felt like at the time the phrase coined was a global citizen. This was the 90s. We were all listening to global trance and going to warehouse parties and, taking drugs that brought us all together. And I felt like I was kind of living that. I'd just been studying popular cultural communication, sociology, art history. I was going to go back and live with a couple of essentially artists who were living upstate. I knew, they were like mentors as much as they were like employees.
Mm.
And it was kind of like taking, sort of doing a foundation course in some respects.
Mm. So tell me about triangles in Connecticut.
Wow. So there are two avenues for rendezvous. Sometimes on a Friday night, I'd want to go out, but I didn't want to go into the city for whatever reason, or I didn't want to go to a straight pub, straight bar, of which there are many. And also GWI is really hardcore. That's if you get caught drunk while intoxicated, that's a huge issue. That whole thing is really pumped into you. So, you're very aware of that. And I looked up where there was the nearest gay bar, which ironically was like an hour's drive. So you might as well have gone into the city. Do you know what I mean? And it was on the outskirts of a small town in Connecticut called Danbury. And there was a bar called Triangles. And it was just how you would imagine it in terms of it like being in this kind of like graveled, rubbled kind of giant car park, almost like a truck stop, and this bar in the middle of this giant sort of car park, and a big sign on the road, Triangles, but that was it. That's what it just said. I didn't have a pink triangle. There was nothing suggested. And maybe it had a little one sort of on the building. But it was pretty discreet. Or was it discreet? Now that I think about it, I think also because it was full of peeps who was sort of like on the cusp of people who had second homes up in Connecticut or in that part of New York, or lived in the area of which they were both. So you had this funny mix of incredibly rich Chelsea bunnies who were in their country retreat for the weekend. But then you also had quite a lot of local kids, misfits, just, your usual queers, be they straight or, batting for the same team or just wanting somewhere else to go and have a good time, like-minded people. And that was like a revelation, and it was cool. And I went, I think I must have started going there pretty soon after I landed, because I was chomping at the bit at this point to just go and explore everything. And, as a young mid-20 queer, with this newfound confidence, and now being of age, legal age, I was like, yeah, give me the directory. I'm going everywhere. And I had this car that I could use whenever I wanted. And of course, the bars were open until super late. So even so it would be like the typical situation would be on a Friday night, the parents maybe were out till like, say, 10 or 11, which was, pretty kind of late. Yeah. And I'd be like, right, I'm going to go out, and it would be sort of too late to go into the city at this point. So I would just, I would get in the car and I would drive like an hour to go to a bar for an hour and then drive back. It would, so 3 hours. I'd have been at the bar for like an hour. And it was kooky. I met a really good bunch of kooks there. I say that, and I mean kook in the most sort of warm way. People, like-minded people who were just like, similar kind of thoughts, queer as fuck, just non-conformist. I think also, but also, very camp, provincial queens who you kind of wanted them to go into the city because you knew they would be amazing, but at the same time, they were so enveloped in their sort of upstate mentality, or so dare I use the term provincial, that it was never something that they did. And I just found that amazing. But I've always found that interesting as somebody who's from Essex, like the number of people that you meet who've never actually been to London, who live just outside London, who never go into the city. But at the same time, here in New York, and we're like, well, would you ever go out in the city? I was like, well, why you go out in the city? They were like, well, it's a long way, it's expensive, up here, most of them are doing college degrees. A lot of people are doing like college degrees, so having to work full time as well as do their college degrees. So
yeah, but isn't that fascinating? Because
my God,
it's not that far away from New York.
No, I know, absolutely. And then there was a guy called Stefan who was a film buff, and I used to watch a lot of films. I used to go to the cinema at every possible opportunity. And of course, Blockbusters was the thing then. And Blockbusters always had and there were also other independent video stores. That there was Camel Video in Yorktown Heights, which was the most fantastic independent video store. And they would have really kind of weird shit. Like, I think that's where I kind of found Fellini and all that kind of old stuff. And you could get all this stuff in the local video stores. But anyway, triangles.
Yeah, so triangles. So we are going down winding country road. Is it a country road or a highway?
Yes. No, it's country roads. Well, there were two ways. You could take Route 684 up and then do a right on some other highway, and then come off the highway. But I was always so terrified I would miss the turnoff and end up in like Maine or something. I would always travel along, and I always sort of enjoyed going down the country roads, as terrifying as they can be at night, especially if it's raining or it's wintry and you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't know where you are. Those American highways, every American horror film comes into your mind when you're driving.
Sorry, I don't know why I laughed then. So we're heading down this road.
So we're heading down this road.
And then, so it's just like a building on the side of the road. And are there other buildings next to it, or is it just on its own?
No. So it's like, when you see a truck stop?
Yeah.
We have truck stops here, lorry stop. When you see like a cafe for lorries?
Yeah.
So there'll be a big expanse of a car park. Maybe there's some like conifers around the edge of it. And then in the middle of that car park, there will be just literally a square building. Maybe in the corner, there's maybe some kind of like petrol station thing. But there will succinctly be like a cafe thing right in the middle of this thing, in this car park. So you're driving along the road, and then you would pull into this giant car park thing, and there would be this and I want to use terms like hick or hillbilly bar spring to mind, which
But kind of,
inappropriate.
is it like a shed?
Yes, kind of like a
Okay.
shed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On the outside, but then when you go inside, there's mirrors for days and a dance floor and a bar, and it was cool. On the outside, yeah, it looked like a den of iniquity. On the inside, it was it was kind of shishi. You went downstairs, it was kind of sunken, and then it was sunken some more to the big dance floor, and there were mirrors everywhere, and the dance floor ended up, and then there was a big bar, and I think there was a lounge area. You could go into a lounge area and just hang out in the booths. And there was a little dance floor there, and then downstairs there was another dance floor. I think there was there was a downstairs because I remember there was a pageant.
How many downstairs was there? Just one
Just
downstairs?
one, just
Okay.
one. And when I say downstairs, I mean like from a mezzanine to a dance
Ah,
floor.
I see. Okay. And then so this mirror thing, tell me about it. So you come in and you're just surrounded by mirrors?
See, so you come in and it's dark, and there'll be some down lights, and there'll be a little corridor. You go past the ticket. There'll be a ticket desk clerk and security. Then you'll go through a little corridor, and then I think there was like a coat check on the right. And then I think there were stairs there down to this dance floor area. But then I think also behind the stairs was the corridor kind of went round, creating a balcony to the stairs into this other lounge area, which maybe had like was more of a cabaret area, like more of a cabaret bar, which maybe had a little stage, which I never saw really being used because everything was downstairs. But there were these booths, and it was just a bit more intimate. And then you had this long bar with sassy barmen, one of whom I did have a liaison with.
Oh.
Just, yeah, I had to climb through his window to get out of his house.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we will. I'm scribbling this down. I'm going to ask questions about this. So we understand the space now. In terms of the clientele, you talked about before that there were lots of. Yeah, I guess so. That part of Connecticut, if you can help me understand, are there lots of people that live there that use it as a like a commuting town, or
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So you've got the what's it called? MTA, Metro Transit
Yeah,
Authority.
yes, yeah.
And then you got the Long Island Railroad. So, and then I think there's probably one to New Jersey, but I never went there. But anyway, so the MTA is sort of like the wider metropolitan area, and it goes way up. It kind of goes way up the Hudson, and it is quite accessible. I mean, but if you think about it, like the greater extents of London are very suburban and very green and very lush. If you go to like Epping, or if you like to go to Bromley, or some of the boroughs on the outer fringes are quite country-like. So
Mm.
it was kind of like being that, but it was a little bit more. I think there was a term they used to use, which was the ex-suburban, so just the periphery of suburbia. That's kind of where we are, and it did carry on a little bit further up. But like I said, there were a lot of people who maybe had a second home or a weekend home. Weekend homes were quite a big deal. That was quite a big thing. People would have these homes and they would go up to Connecticut at the weekend. They would have a place up there at the weekend, and then they would probably have a place downtown during the week. So that was not that was not it was not a major big deal, other than if you then wanted to start dating, it would mean that they weren't around for most of the time. But that's another story. Um, but then also, like I said, there was also quite a kind of a niche sort of local community as well. So it was a real convergence of kind of like, it was sort of like metro savvy. That sounds really condescending talking it because it sounds really us and them, like city queers and country queers. But it was a really interesting mix. Like I said, there are a lot of people who were local, but they were really, they were on a trajectory. They were working full time, they were going to college, they were looking at going to film school, or they were professional, they were semi-professional, or some maybe had moved out the city because they'd been there already. And I found that really interesting as somebody who was like, get me into the city as quickly as possible because I want to go down to the East Village and be a proper queer. I just found, but I found that whole kind of like provincial queerness something really intriguing. That really intrigued me.
That is interesting, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I had the same kind of experience as you, I guess. It's just like, get me out of this small town. I need to move somewhere bigger, and I need to like experience these queer clubs and like really do this. Let's do it properly. And then there were people that in the
Yes.
town where I grew up who were just quite happy
Yes.
to be there, and it was like,
I
what is wrong with
never.
you?
I know. I never understood it. I was thinking about a friend of mine the other day, and just super quickly, he was a year above me. He was really great. He was really good. He excelled at art, and I really looked up to him. And he was clearly queer, and we kind of like made all those teenage references that you do without actually mentioning yourselves, because it was still quite a dark time. The late '80s was still quite a dark time to come out, especially if you're a
Mhm.
teenager.
So what
To
you
have a.
just so you just like started talking about the Golden Girls in order to.
Oh no, we talk about Rhythm Nation.
Oh, okay.
We
That's
talked
how
about
you
the
let him know.
we talked about the evolution of Janet Jackson from Control to Rhythm Nation. That was essentially it. And I remember, he was really good at art and he made amazing clothes. He wanted to be a fashion designer. And then I moved schools. And like I said, he graduated. I then went to the comprehensive school. And then I was in London. I mean, sorry, in Colchester, of all places. I can't remember why I was in the sort of social security. I can't remember I don't even know why I was in there. But anyway, I went to meet him to see if he would like to meet for coffee. And he was like, oh, and as it turned out, we couldn't for whatever reason. But he was like, yeah, I'm not interested in going. I've got this job now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm fine. I don't want to go. And I was like, dude, you inspired me. You were like, you introduced me to Janet Jackson. You made a velvet glove in your A-level A-level arts thing. And now you're going to work in the Social Security office. He was like, well, yeah, it's a da-da-da. And I was like, I do not understand. And to this day, I kind of don't. I think, well, actually, having said that, of course, now I live in the countryside, so I can see why you kind of go back to it. And I can also see why people don't leave that. But it's all to do with being in the moment and sort of making the most of your situation, which.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, like, for me, like, I totally get that if you're heterosexual because, like,
Yes.
you've not had any friction in your. I'm sorry, this is total generalization, but like, you haven't felt like an outsider because of your sexual orientation, and so it would be easy for you to be like, yeah, well, this is good, I fit in here. But as a queer person, I'm a bit like. But like this community has like alienated you your whole life. Like, go and find your tribe. Like, why are you
Yeah,
just like
exactly.
hanging out here?
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, different strokes, different folks. I don't know why.
Indeed, absolutely. No, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I think you put that very succinctly. I don't know, and it just seems somehow more sort of amplified, especially in New York, because you were that close to it. And also, as an outsider, I would be like, well, hey, why don't we all go into town next weekend? So, and they would be like, what are you, crazy? I mean, a lot of them, but also
We might get
you have
mugged.
to. Well, it was less that, but more the fact that they were all so busy. Okay, like I said, these people, if they were studying for a degree, they would be working full time. So actually, the idea of free time was, a kind of mystery to them. They were like, oh, God, I wish I had free weekends. And, it's things like that that made me kind of realize how lucky I had it. I wasn't earning a huge amount of money, but I had no overheads. I had a car. I didn't have to pay for any food or board. All the money that I earned was purely recreational. I would squirrel that money away. I would either buy shoes or I would just have, go on amazing weekends in the city.
How many shoes did you have to take home at the end of this year?
11 pairs of shoes I took home in the
Oh,
year.
okay, that's not so bad.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a lot. Well, that's fine. I
Well,
feel
I mean
that's
that fits in a suitcase. I can
God, the suitcase. Oh my God, and the rest. There was so much stuff taken back at the end of that year. So much stuff. So
Okay, so we have a good idea of the clientele. Now let's get on to this bartender, shall we?
we can if you want.
What was his name?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay. Let's let's
I can't remember
call
his
let's
name.
call him something. Dad.
Let's,
So
he
he
might
had,
have been a Dan. He could have been a Dan. He could have been a Ralph.
Oh, a Ralph. That's really an American. Let's go with Ralph. Let's go with
Maybe it was
Ralph.
like Travis.
Oh,
Ralph.
oh.
Okay, so his name is Ralph.
Okay, yeah,
Travis is kind of cool.
yeah, Travis, I do like, but let's, we've picked Ralph. Let's go
We're
with
gonna,
Ralph. So
yeah.
tell me about
Sorry.
Ralph.
What can I say? Ralph was a very sweet barman who, was very meek and mild and worked behind the bar at Triangles. And our eyes, I kind of, I mean, it's so bizarre because I've only recently kind of really thought about all these things. About we, I mean, we barely dated. I'll be completely frank. We barely dated. But there would have been, for me, it would have been the whole seeing somebody and then having to kind of work through that process of what am I going to say and how am I going to say it, you know?
What, like overthinking and over preparing?
Oh, yes. And totally being sort of like 110% in awe of this person. So like, oh, well, how am I, oh, he's not going to want to talk to me. All of that malarkey.
Oh.
Ralph would have been, I don't know.
Wait, I thought
He
you were
was
saying that you were like super confident this time.
Yeah, I was, but that was just
But Ralph was another level, was he?
yeah, I was super confident as a person, as a single person exploring the world and the universe. When it came to dating men, I was still a blithering wreck. I didn't
Okay.
have sexual confidence.
Okay.
That did not come until much, much later. So that was. I mean, but it's interesting you say that. So that it would be fraught because it's like I would have this sort of like joie de vivre. This is amazing. I'm in New York. It's fantastic. And then I would see a certain type of guy, and I would be like, oh my god, I'm completely obsessed. Who is this person? And talk to them. They are the meaning of my life. That is why I'm here. So I'd really have to take myself aside and have a good talking to. I didn't really deal with sort of men and sex in a really confident way until I was in my mid to late 20s, definitely. Definitely.
Ah.
But I still had some fun. But also, there's something kind of innocent and naive about that whole, hey, I mean, it sounds pathetic, but I sort of like the mental foreplay of meeting guys. And then, of course, as soon as you meet them, it's like, I never need to see this person again in my life ever. I can't believe I've just spent 6 months fantasizing about this person.
Hold up, wait, what? You're pathetic. Yeah,
Huh?
I know all about that. But so how did you get to be climbing out of his window?
Well, obviously Ralph was when eventually I did speak to him. He was hugely taken aback and was super excited, and there was clearly a frisson. And he had no car because he would usually get a car back. He would usually get a ride back with his, I don't know, colleague or whatever. And I was like, oh, dude, I have a car. I could drive you back to your place. So we went out back to his place, and then we started, making out in the car. And yes, it was one of those heady nights of walking out on a hot, sticky summer night from the to the car, getting in the car, driving him back to his, having another hot, sticky night, having a hot, sticky moment in the car, and then him sort of, totally getting swept away with it, and him saying, "Would you want to come in?" And of course, you're like, "Well, yeah, sure." And he's like, "Well, you have to be really careful because I live with my mom and my dad and my sister and my little brother Tommy and little," and you're like, "Oh, okay." So, we went through, we got into the house through the front door. That was fine. But then one thing led to another, and, it was quite a long time later. And then I had to climb out of his window to get out. But that's
Oh,
the car.
but not because someone was like coming in or anything, just because.
His mother was around, yes. And I
Ah.
think that was the thing. It was like, there's something I need to tell you. And you're like, oh, you want to spend the rest of my life with me? The rest of your life with me? The rest of my life with me? The rest of your life with me? And he was like, no, my mother doesn't know I'm gay. You need to get out the window.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Why
that
would
was,
you take? Why would you? Oh, Ralph. Why
I
would you?
know, poor old Ralph. But that was we've all kind of been there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, but not you. Like, you've just finished telling me like you were super cautious and super by the rules. If you hadn't told your mum that you were gay, then you wouldn't be bringing someone back.
Well, interesting. Yes, so maybe
Oh! Is this an? Oh, am I going to get a
that's a
story
whole
here?
other revelation. I think. Well, I don't know. It's interesting that you say that. I may have to find him now. I may have to go back to him and ask him that question. Yeah, it was a bit weird, and I sort of remember thinking, so you work in a gay bar, and you see guys and you let them bring you home, but you're not out to your parents. And I was like, oh cool, cool. That's the reality. That I mean, you see that in films though. You see that. Let's look at Heathers when Kristen Slater climbs in through that window of she's not Sigourney Weaver, she's the other one.
Winona Ryder.
Thank you, Winona Ryder. It
Well,
was a big deal, I thought for me, again, it sort of added to the excitement because it was like, I am literally in an American teen movie climbing out someone's window, get out of their house and run to my car without being caught.
and he loves me so much that he brought
He
me into
loves me
his
so
house, like
got me to his
regardless of
house.
the risks. Yeah.
Now I'm never going to speak to him again. Yeah, exactly.
And then so what? So you had like one thing with Ralph and then that was it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. And as I'm saying this, I think maybe that was. I don't think, if I'm honest with you, I had any. Oh no, the first time I was in the States, 91 to 92, I don't think I had a sexual rendezvous until I was at the end of that year and I got to San Francisco. And then I was like a rabbit, basically. But isn't that weird? That whole year, I don't think anything happened in that whole year. Because sometimes when I look back on it, I kind of think, oh yeah, it was then. It was like, no, that was the next year. So sometimes I'll think about something that happened and I'll get the years muddled up because they were kind of close together. But anyway, that's kind of boring. But yeah, no, it's interesting sort of mapping out the friendships of that first year and how that worked out. That was much more nanny orientated, shall we say, than the second year, which was much more. It was pretty spread out. I had my Connecticut crew from Triangles, and we would hang out a lot, and that would be fun. And then, I remember an amazing Halloween party. I remember amazing house parties up in these little towns. And then from that, I had this not a relationship, where I had a friendship with a guy called Stefan, who in hindsight, I think we really fancied each other, but neither of us actually said anything. And he would come over on Friday nights and we would watch movies after the kids had gone to bed because it was Friday night, it was date night for the parents. And he talked like a New York films student, and I'd studied film studies a little bit. So we both had these overblown egos and this whole kind of parlance, which I think we both got a kick out of. I think maybe we went into the city once together, but nothing really happened. And and again, it was one of those things where you look back and you think, oh, that's why he kept calling up and coming round. It was like, oh, so ridiculous. But then also there was a whole East Side scene. So I would go down, my beeline would be to the boiler room of the East Village.
Mm-hmm.
So I got there in August of 95. So it's hot, sticky. And I'm also, don't forget, the previous nanny whose role I am sort of assuming, she's still there. So we had a bit of an overlap. To help the kids out and also just to kind of, keep it cool. So yeah,
but she was fired.
She was a wild child. Well, she wasn't fired. She was just a bit of a wild child, and they had just kind of gotten to the end of their tether with her.
So she was fired.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to say she was fired, but she was totally at the end of her.
She was terminated.
She was mildly terminated. I think you say she was mildly terminated. She was definitely at the end of. She was definitely at the end of her contract. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Or the contract was changed, so she was leaving. Anyway, I mean, she was great, but she was a wild child. I mean, she took me to places in New York. It was like amazing, and that was also helped me move forward in terms of my social life in New York City. She would take me to Don Hills, which was down in what was the meatpacking district. Now it's like Disney World. But and it was it had been open for years. I think, it had been there for years, and it was owned by this one guy at Don Hill. And on Friday nights was the most incredible queer part. It was like turning up at Ducky, you know what I mean? back in the day. Well, and as it still would be now. But you know what I mean? It's like you just turn up in this club, and it would be like, there would be an amazing. It's the first time I kind of experienced militant drag king lesbianism, and these rock and roll dudes, and I thought they were guys, and they were. It turned out they were lesbian, like hardcore, like cross-dressing lesbians, drag kings, however they identified at the time. And it was just amazing. And they play, it wasn't like clubby, like techno-y. They played really good rock music, and it was a really rocky vibe, and it was really queer as fuck. And it was 1995, and it was the 90s, and we were down in the fucking meatpacking district. And it was amazing. And you would just get so drunk and so hot and sticky, and then somehow a lot more often than not, I would make my way home. And as I'm saying that, I'm absolutely mortified to think that I would be drunk and then get the last possible train home and then drive back from the station, praying that nobody would stop me. I got stopped once having a dodgy light. I was so relieved. Oh my God, I was so lucky. But yeah, if I got too pissed, I would then try and find somebody to sleep with. But we've all been there, haven't we?
Oh yeah, I mean that's good motivation to hook up. But so the train home. So you'd catch the train from the city to like.
To be fair,
you would.
Yeah, well, not quite the end of the line. It was actually not the end of the line at all. Really, it was just really like the further you go out of the main, when you get on a sort of local train going out of the city, the further you go out, the more distant the towns become. And so sort of like White Plains, and then you'd have there's a town called Valhalla, and there would be like Pleasantville, and then you would have Chappaqua, and then you would have Mount Kisco, and Mount Kisco was kind of like the end of the local town network, and then it would be like the next town would be quite a way away. That would be, I couldn't even tell you what it was called. Brewster North. It would end up in a town called Brewster North, which was far, far, far up to 684. But people would still commute from there, and it was that would be like an hour and a half, maybe an hour and a half.
Wow.
So yes.
So how long would you drive when you got off the train? I know this is detail. I don't need to know.
Literally 5 minutes.
So why there's no walk?
Because there's no sidewalks. There was no sidewalks, and it was far enough for it to be a fag to walk. But it was, it wasn't really 5 minutes. It was probably more like a 5 to 10 minute drive along really kind of crazy, woody, dark, pitch black roads with no sidewalks. Nobody walks. Wow. Nobody walks.
Okay.
There's no sidewalks, so you can't walk. There's no pavements. Yeah, so really
they wanted you to drink and drive.
Kind of. That's the weird thing about the culture. That's the kind of weird. Well, no, it's true. I mean, if you got back after 11, you couldn't get a cab. I remember getting back. I think it was when I'd been traveling, so I came back and I got back to Mount Kisco station, and it was just before midnight, and there were no cabs. The cabs had gone home. I went to the police station and I said, "Look, there's no cabs. Can you give me a ride back?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure." I couldn't believe I didn't call up Steph or John, even if it was the middle of the night, and ask. But anyway, I can't remember why that happened. But yeah, I remember getting a ride back with the police. So yes, you have this kind of strange sort of unaccepted rules things, which everybody must have been doing or was doing.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry, that's just like detail I don't need to know, as I said. So triangles, I'm just having a look at
triangles. We haven't even got to the boiler room yet.
Well, just looking at the review on the website, on
their they've set one up.
So triangles is 3 bars in one with 3 unique experiences for our customers. Whether you want to dance the night away on our 500 square foot dance floor, have a quiet drink with friends in our intimate billiards lounge, or relax and enjoy our outdoor.
It was a billiards lounge. Yes. 66 Sugar Hollow. Oh my God. Yes, here it is. I can't. Why didn't I look this up?
Oh, and they have movie nights, karaoke, and stripper nights. Do you remember any of those?
Maybe. Yes.
Wait.
Karaoke, yes.
Did you perform at the stripper nights?
No. Oh my God, it's all that. Oh, bless your heart. The place is closed.
Yeah,
No, the
yeah,
place is closed.
yes. That's why we're
It is
talking about
closed.
it.
Oh, okay, fine, great. Oh, it's shut down. I wonder what happened. The decor could have been improved, but I really enjoyed my time there. The music was decent. The crowd was fun. I had a good time every time. Danbury has lost a
Oh,
great cornerstone. Well, it has. If you want me to talk about urban regeneration, this is now the segue for that, but we won't.
oh. Well, can we just keep reading these reviews for the time being? Because I quite enjoy when people leave kind of weird reviews on these websites. So this person has given it 2 stars. She's only checked in once.
But is
Um.
that Elle? You're looking at Elle.
Oh yeah, I'm
She's from
looking at
Astoria.
Elle.
See,
She's
this is
from.
it. She's from Astoria,
So
which
she's
is
too cool. Is that what you're saying?
well, Astoria is Long Island. Like it's just maybe Queens. So it's sort of like the wrong side of outside of town. I think I can say that with some kind of confidence. Please, tell me otherwise.
So
So
so we
it
don't
sounds
trust
like
her.
we don't trust her, no, because she's
Okay.
from Astoria, so she's not even going into Manhattan. It's like why is she going to Danbury to go to a gay bar? Do you know
Well,
what I
I
mean?
mean, she
Maybe she's
does she
torrential.
does say that considering I usually pay $9 to $12 a drink in New York City. So she does go to New York City. My
Oh, she does. She
bartender
does that.
my
Yes.
bartender was burly and pleasant, and in general the place was a chill vibe with little shade. Don't get me wrong, everybody was reading, but they generally kept it to themselves, except in the bathroom where the library was in session. Oh, she's watched too much Drag Race.
Oh, is that a right? Okay,
I think it's a Paris is Burning thing, isn't it?
I'm say right. Okay, I say the best thing that could happen to this place is if they sashay away the DJ. Oh no, please, no, 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 no.
So let's move on to Franklin. It can be hit or miss. Sometimes you go and the place is dead with little going on. Other times it can be crowded and a lot of fun.
True story. True story.
Wow, I mean, that's just so insightful.
Well, no, but the interesting thing is like a lot of people would have travelled a long time to get like I would drive an hour. So you're driving an hour to go to a bar where there's five people in there,
That's
just so
depressing.
you could be in a gay bar.
Oh,
On
let's look at the one from EB from 2008. What with its proximity to
a,
demographically divergent Fairfield, Putnam, Westchester, Litchfield, and Dutchess counties, Triangles
ta-da!
draws a surreal combination of young, just off the plane
Just off the plane,
Brazilians,
Brazilian.
Brazilians, what? Established gay
Established
elders,
gay elders,
children of
children
the
of
ice
the ice
storm.
storm. Yes. Do
So
you know
what
what that
does
reference is?
well, I know the film The Ice Storm. Is that what?
Yes, I think that's what it's about because the ice storm was set in a particular part of New York, which is
Uh,
Westchester, which is this whole area. So it's trees and big houses,
okay,
and
okay.
more trees and big houses, and Volvos as well.
Okay. Okay, so
So yeah,
Children of the Ice
children of the
Storm,
ice storm. Yeah,
prosperous guppies.
guppies. That's what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
it says guppies. Anyway,
Um,
hard scrabble bears. What's a hard scrabble
so
bear?
first of all, okay, a guppy is a gay yuppie.
Oh, okay, sorry. I should
I
know
can't
that.
believe they've only given it 2 stars. Hard Scrabble Bears. I think what that means is hard Scrabble is like scarp, like a proper country, like proper sort of. They'd have a kind of checkered shirt. Burly.
So, like, they play Scrabble in a really aggressive way?
Yes, they play Scrabble in a really aggressive way,
Okay.
really hard way. Yeah,
Expat New Yorkers and closeted
yeah,
married guys who
yeah.
generally work the loosh parking lot rather than venturing inside.
This is. I can't. I tell you what. Your research is pucker. This is exactly. This could not have rounded it up more
Although,
accurately.
well, it goes on. Although the music often sucks, the multifarious crowd makes its own fun by drinking lots and striking up conversations.
Yeah.
I don't understand what the next sentence says.
That was really friendly.
Yeah,
Conversation. Smokers and Rihanna refugees will welcome the large enclosed outdoor space.
what's a Rihanna refugee?
I think he means pot smokers.
But what? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Rihanna likes to smoke weed, doesn't she?
But this is 2008.
Yeah. Was Rihanna around then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, is it Rihanna that? that they're
Oh, it's a
referring
different
to.
spelling. You are correct. You see again. Look that shit up. No, I think he means Rihanna. When did she start then? That's a whole other thing.
But why would
Anyway,
you be a
um,
refugee of Rihanna? Anyway,
well, I think they're just trying to be vague because, it's about weed. And it was 2008 before legalization. So
thank you, EB,
now I
for
want to
that
know when
insight.
Rihanna started her career. But anyway, large enclosed outdoor space. Yes, I remember that. Festive in one way. Totally. It was great. It was amazing. It was amazing. Not as good as the boiler room, but it was a different experience in the boiler room. But
So, what
it
would
was
you
a
say were the
brilliant.
main differences then?
Well, the boiler room was a sleazy East Village, possibly the friendliest bar I've ever been to. Actually, it wasn't even that sleazy. It kind of, it didn't, no, it was the most friendly, easygoing, welcoming, queer as fuck. We ain't taking no shit from anybody else. Don't give me no heteronormative bullcrap. Yes, come in for happy hour. We will watch Xena on the TV at 6. I think it was 6:30 or 7 o'clock the Saturday night, and I would be there. I would be there most Saturday nights. I would go down to the boiler room, watch Xena, be there in time for happy hour, and then have a couple of long, very long, because everything's served with a lot of ice, vodka tonics. And then I might even get home at a respectable hour, or I would just stay and play as tour. And now that was also a second home. So I had oh my God, it's all in a year. I had Triangles, which was sort of like haven of Westchester, parochial country, life, as it were, the good life version. And then there was the boiler room downtown, which offered so much more and was also so much more exciting because you were actually in Manhattan. You were in you were where it's at. You were in Alphabet Street. You were maybe near Tompkins Square Park, where you may want to go and, score some weed or smoke weed, or you would,
Be
pop
a
around the corner,
Rihanna refugee.
be a Rihanna refugee, pop over the road to someone's apartment and have a quick shimmy and then go back to the bar, or you'd go to the amazing diner where Quentin Crisp used to hang out and eat all his food, all his meals, or you would go to one of the many other local bars, which would be amazing. And I have to say, the 1996 Pride in New York was amazing. And I had a boyfriend who I met in Mount Kisco. I had found this guy who I'd spent months being totally obsessed, well, in lust with. And he used to hang out at the Starbucks cafe in Mount Kisco, which at the time, Starbucks was young and innocent then. So we thought it was new and exciting and unusual. So we'd all go and hang out there. There was another independent coffee shop, but we didn't go there quite so often because it didn't quite have the same hours. But anyway, and we would go and eventually one day I summoned up because I knew he had to be queer. I knew he had to be queer because he just had such a great wardrobe,
Oh, that's obvious,
And
yeah.
yeah, totally. Well, especially in the burbs, somebody bleaching their hair blonde color and then dyeing it green, like they kind of do now. That kind of washed out colored hair thing
Yeah.
that the kids are doing. He was doing that back in the 90s. Oh, Mikey. Anyway, so one day I summoned up the courage to ask him if he was batting for the same team as mine and fancied to escorting me to Pride in the city. And he was like, sure, that sounds great. So we went in and had a time of our lives. And this was all like through various people I'd met at the boiler room. We just went from one party to the next. We stayed at my friend Fergus and John's. They were dynamite. It was just like, if you go to a bar a couple of times, you start being, it was like this, and I hope it's still like this now. Maybe it is in some places. You kind of start being a bit familiar, and what was amazing was sort of how easy and also yet how genuine some of these quite like fleeting relationships were, but they would be like really intense and maybe like for me, I always thought that maybe part of that liberation is about living 5,000 or 6,000 miles away from home and not having to deal with the fact that the the sort of lingering terrors of your childhood with you wherever you go when you when you live at home. When you move yourself geographically 5,000 away, there's nothing to bump into. You are significantly removed from yourself. That you kind of you take on another version of yourself. That's how I feel it. That's how I feel I experienced it. And again, with this newfound confidence, it was just, and yeah, I think by the end of that year, there's definitely a huge, significant sexual confidence shift in me. It was still a bit fraught, but I had a really good time. And hanging out in the boiler room and just I remember there because I was there on my birthday. Sorry, I'm going off on one there, but I was there on my birthday. It was the week before Christmas, and I'd gone in specifically to go to the boiler room and just have a giggle. And there were some kind of party going on there anyway. And Luscious, who was the bar, kind of, I don't know, what would you say, mother, shall we say? Last time I saw Luscious, they were running a bar in Silver Lake in LA. They all moved out to LA a few years in the late 90s. Anyway, they were like, hey, dear, what are you doing here? I was like, well, I'm from out of town. I just come down, found the boiler room. I really want to start, I've moved here. I'm English and it's my birthday. And before I knew it, everybody just leapt upon me. And that was when I first discovered Jägermeister. And it got me absolutely shit-faced on Jägermeister. And we just had a good time. And then it was just like, boom, that was it. This is what I'm going back to. Every week after then, it was like, these are my people. This is my home in the city, and it was great. It was absolutely amazing.
Oh, I've scribbled this down, so it might not be of any relevance. You said you saw a pageant at Triangles.
I did. It was a Halloween fancy dress competition.
And like a drag, so it wasn't drag then, it was just.
No, it wasn't drag. I think maybe there were a couple of drag. There was some very clever drag. There was some very good, from the Guppies and the newly residing in the local sort of New York. And that's what I mean. There was an interesting clientele because it was a really kind of broad mix of people who were there. And I remember there was a really great sort of young, sort of academic looking lesbian who dressed up as a paraglider, complete with the parachute sort of up and behind her. I also remember dancing to Mariah Carey that night. I didn't win. I went dressed as the devil, which is somewhat predictable.
Yeah.
I remember there being a Barry guy there, but I can't remember what he came as. But no, it wasn't. It wasn't surprising. It was surprisingly not draggy, and I think also again that was kind of like what appealed to me because there was a sort of broader sense of humour, broader kind of notion of the culture, which I find so difficult to kind of get on with now. Is this concentric RuPaul drag race culture of queerness, which we seem to have now got ourselves into.
What does it? So you think? What? Sorry. What do you mean?
What I think is, and this might sound a bit weird or controversial or whatever, I feel like there was a greater sense of liberation then, and I really miss that. And I feel like a lot of younger queers don't necessarily, not that I would recommend it, not, obviously one celebrates the fact that the point is kids don't need to kind of have to deal with that, but some people do, and they deal with it in horrible ways. I just think that then it was a pinnacle of a time, a pinnacle of sort of real kind of shifting in ideology. The 90s was totally transformative. I don't know if I said this already, but it was a real shift in terms of thinking. It sort of went from being a kind of still a quite marginal cultural community to being a real kind of dominant and especially kind of consumer force. It created its own capital. Pig pound was very much something that people talked about. And it was when there was also a kind of counterculture to that. And Mark Simpson wrote a book called Anti-Gay, which was all about how gay had been kind of consumed by capitalism and been turned into a lifestyle rather than a sexual identity. And it was really exciting to be involved and part of these conversations which were happening right now, which really sort of defined how, especially for those of us who really identified as being queer, it kind of gave us a sort of sense of justification for that. So a lot of these venues have been there for some time and are still very kind of are somehow entrenched in the scene. But at the same time, there is still an idea that there is a sort of deviance around them, but at the same time, they are much more acceptable. And so this is also a time when there's a whole idea of like having a bridge and tunnel crowd in Manhattan. New York was amazing during the 90s, and people came from all over the place, and from like beyond the burbs, from all over the states as well, would come to these bars. And it was just, I don't know, it was the beginning of something. So I was saying what I felt then was that I had much more of a kind of rite of passage to find my sexual identity. And I feel right now that sexual identity is something that is given to you, and this is how you do it. You kind of get it with a manual. And I think as much as that's great, on the one hand, if you choose to accept it, you do not have to go down the really tricky routes that perhaps we went down before. But what I think is difficult is when people don't want to subscribe to that. How do you you've somehow been splintered from that. And I feel like people should be able to find their own way, and it
So,
should not be prescribed.
are you trying to say that, like in the past, everyone had to forge their own path, and therefore it was kind of
Yes,
more authentic, and now you kind of get a manual that's like, this is what you
yes,
do?
yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to
Ah,
say.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't
Does that make
know.
sense? I don't know
Yeah,
what.
no, it makes sense, and like I can appreciate, I guess what you're trying to say, that, well, what I think you're trying to say, that like, it's more authentic if it's something that you've worked out on your own rather than something you've been told to do. But can't you kind of like, it's like watching a YouTube tutorial video for how to like cut your own hair or something. Like, you're not going and like learning from, you're not kind of going through lots of mistakes in order to learn how to cut hair. You're, skipping a bunch of steps, but you can still then kind of put your own flair on it, right?
Uh, yes, I mean, I think you can. I think it depends on how you even get to the point where you're creating the flair. And I think that, one of the tricky issues that we have, especially within the context of a tea being, as it should be, a much widely accessible and talked about notion of sexuality, and gender. And I feel like sometimes we are much quicker to create and sort of trap people into a pigeonhole
Mm.
than to allow people to go through a really fluid post process until, like, over a period of like years, decades even, to find a kind of mean. I feel like we also expect people to have the decisions made so that then everybody else can basically conform as quickly as possible, and we can get on like there's no issue, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my career experience is not about that. My career experience is still happening around me and evolving, as opposed to it being something prescribed to me and only it's right, you are now 21, you are now fully fledged gay man, and you can go and do whatever you like, and you can really act and assimilate to straight culture because it's not really an issue, and then you can have a really quiet life, thank you very much. Well, I think that brings along a whole other bunch of issues which people don't even want to talk about, let alone can talk about now. Because I just think that you can never prescribe what is going on with your life because things change so rapidly and so quickly, both in your mind and in the world around you. And I find it really, I find it quite sad that queer identity has become so boring and yet so bloody factional as well. We're supposed to be at the top end of the cultural pyramid telling everybody else how to do their shit. And it feels like now we've kind of lost our shit a bit. But anyway, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if like there's, I, 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 I do kind of see what you're saying and kind of agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, like for those queer kids who are 14 who like don't really know what's going on, I think it's much better for them to have some kind of touch points to be like, oh, okay, I get this. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is kind of
Yeah.
explained here. And yeah, there is problems with putting things in boxes and therefore putting people in boxes. But I think, yeah, I mean, as a cisgendered white man who kind of had it easy in terms of coming out, I'm probably not in the best position to talk about this, but knowing that kids who have it worse than I did have that the materials to be signposted to or to
Yeah.
find themselves, I think
Absolutely.
is really reassuring.
But I think there's a difference between signposting and creating
Yeah, there's a
dominant
nuance. Yeah.
yes, exactly. I think that it should. Well, for me, I love the nuance anyway, and I just feel like it could be. We could embrace nuance a lot more than we do now. I feel like there's a lot
Yeah.
less nuance now.
Humans are
And
dumb though. Like
yeah, we are
we have to accept
totally.
that. Like we need to put things in boxes and then have big flashing signs around them
No, we
for
need
people
mother
to be like, "Oh, okay, I get this."
exactly. We need Mother Nature to give us a pandemic to bring us down the notch, so we don't keep trying to destroy them. And if we don't follow our heart, then it's our last chance. Anyway, that's
Well,
another
that's
thing.
another story.
That's a whole other story. Anyway, let's go back to New York in the heady 90s.
Did you ever go to Triangles in Connecticut? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Please share any stories or anecdotes or photos through social media. You can find me on most platforms, that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the rest, with the user handle KAndersonMusic. And you can also find out more about Timberlina by visiting her website, timberlina.co.uk. And also, Timberlina hosts her own podcast called Live from Rye, which you can hear on all good podcast platforms. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year and a bit. You can hear the first single, Well Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all good streaming platforms. If you like this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told someone who you think might be interested in having a listen to. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening